They moved my fence 8 feet onto my land, and then had the nerve to tell me I could take it up with a lawyer. What they didn't realize was I wasn't about to argue. I was about to make their entire project grind to a halt. And the funny thing is, I didn't raise my voice once. So, I live just outside a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place where people still wave when they drive past you, even if they don't know you, where properties are wide, quiet, and spread out enough that your closest neighbor feels like a distant relative you only see on holidays. I bought my place about 10 years ago, nothing fancy, just a modest house sitting on 5 acres of land, with a long gravel driveway that curves past a field before it reaches my garage. That field, that's what mattered to me. Open space, tall grass in the summer, a line of old wooden fence posts marking the edge like they'd been there longer than anyone could remember. And honestly, that fence wasn't even in great shape. Some posts leaned a little, a few were weathered and gray, but it did its job. It told you, without needing to say a word, where my land ended and the next one began. And for years, that next lot was empty. Just wild grass, a few scattered trees, nothing going on. I liked it that way. Quiet. Predictable. Then one spring, everything changed. First it was the trucks. Big ones. Dump trucks, flatbeds, equipment trailers rolling in early in the morning, kicking up dust along the road. Then came the machines, bulldozers, excavators, survey crews walking around with those tripod things, sticking little flags into the ground like they were claiming territory. That's when I found out the empty lot had been sold. The guy behind it all was named Travis Mercer. Mid-40s maybe, clean cut, always wearing those polished work boots that somehow never looked dirty, even on a construction site. You could tell right away, this wasn't his first project. He had that quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't ask permission. At first, I didn't care. I mean, it wasn't my land. People build, that's just how things go. I figured a couple houses would go up, maybe bring in some new neighbors, nothing too crazy. But then one afternoon, I came home from work, pulled into my driveway, and something felt off. I couldn't even tell you exactly what it was at first, just this subtle shift in the way the place looked. You ever get that feeling? Like your brain notices something before you do? So I parked, got out of the truck, and just stood there for a second, scanning the field. That's when I saw it. The fence. It looked newer, straighter, cleaner. And that didn't make sense, because I hadn't touched it. I walked out into the grass, slow at first, then a little faster as that uneasy feeling started to settle into something more solid. The closer I got, the clearer it became. The old posts were gone. Every single one of them. In their place was a brand new line of wooden posts, evenly spaced, perfectly aligned, with fresh boards running between them. And here's the part that hit me like a punch in the chest. It wasn't where it used to be. I stopped about 10 feet away and just stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, like maybe my memory was playing tricks on me. But it wasn't. I knew that land. I'd walked it 100 times, mowed it, stood out there with a beer watching the sun go down. That fence had been closer to the tree line. Now, it sat deeper into my field. So I did what anyone would do. I paced it out. 1 step, 2 steps, 3, counting under my breath. 8 feet. 8 feet of my land was now on the other side of that fence. And I'll be honest with you. I just stood there for a minute, hands on my hips, kind of laughing to myself. Not because it was funny, but because it was so bold it almost felt unreal. Like, who just moves a boundary line and thinks no one's going to notice? I didn't storm over. I didn't start yelling. That's not really my style. Instead, I turned around, walked back to my truck, and drove over to where the construction crew had set up a temporary office, one of those portable trailers parked near the entrance of the site. Travis was there, standing outside, talking to a couple guys in hard hats, pointing at a set of plans spread out on the hood of a pickup. He looked up when I approached, gave me a quick nod, like we were just 2 neighbors about to have a normal conversation. "Hey," he said, casual as could be. I nodded back. "We need to talk about that fence." He didn't even look surprised. If anything, he looked prepared. "Oh yeah," he said, folding up the plans like this was already a closed topic. "We had the land surveyed. That's the correct boundary line." Just like that. No hesitation. I crossed my arms, glanced back toward the field. That fence has been in the same spot for decades. He shrugged, slight smile, almost amused. "Surveys change things." I let that sit for a second. "You moved it 8 feet onto my property." He tilted his head a little, like he was humoring me. According to the survey, it's exactly where it's supposed to be. And there it was, that tone. Calm, confident, dismissive. So what are you saying? I asked. Every fence that's been there for years is just wrong? He gave a small chuckle. I'm saying if you think there's an issue, you're welcome to take it up legally. There was no anger in his voice. That's what made it worse. It was clean, polished, like he'd had this conversation before and already knew how it ended. I looked at him for a long second, trying to decide if this was ignorance or arrogance, and honestly, I couldn't tell. All right, I said finally, nodding once. I'll look into it. And just like that, I turned and walked away. No yelling, no threats. But inside something had shifted, because it wasn't just about 8 feet of land anymore. It was about the way he said it. Like I didn't have a say, like I wouldn't do anything about it. That night, I went digging through a box in my garage, pulled out the paperwork from when I bought the property, closing documents, maps, and eventually, the survey. I spread it out on my kitchen table, ran my finger along the boundary lines, tracing them slowly, carefully. And there it was. Clear as day. The fence line, the original one, was exactly where I remembered it, meaning the new one was wrong. 8 feet wrong. And that's when I realized something. If he was willing to move a fence without asking, what else was he willing to take? I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry, not exactly, but because my mind kept circling the same question over and over. How far was this guy willing to push it if nobody pushed back? It wasn't just the 8 feet anymore. It was the attitude behind it, the kind that assumes most people will sigh, shake their heads, maybe complain a little, and then let it go. And I'll admit, for a brief moment, I considered it. I mean, life's easier when you avoid conflict, right? But every time I pictured that fence sitting there, clean and straight and wrong, something in me tightened up. So the next morning, I called a local surveyor, an older guy named Hank Doyle, someone who'd been working this county longer than I'd even lived here. Hank wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, but when he showed up 2 days later with his equipment, you could tell he knew exactly what he was doing. We walked the line together, him stopping every few steps, checking measurements, marking points, barely saying a word. I just followed along, hands in my pockets, watching. After about an hour, he stood up straight, wiped his hands on his jeans, and looked at me. Your fence was right, he said. Simple as that. No drama. No hesitation. I nodded slowly, like I already knew, but hearing it out loud, that made it real. And the new one? I asked. He gave a small shrug. 8 feet onto your side. Maybe a hair more in some spots. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So it's not even close. Not even a little, he said. Then he paused, glanced toward the construction site where machines were already moving dirt like nothing was wrong. You gonna fight it? I looked out there too, watching one of the trucks roll in through a wide gravel entrance they'd carved out near the road. That's when I noticed it, really noticed it. The angle of that entrance. The way it cut in. Yeah, I said quietly. Just not the way he expects. Hank didn't ask any more questions. Just packed up his gear, gave me a nod, and headed out. And that left me standing there alone, staring at that entrance, something starting to take shape in my head. See, when Travis moved that fence, he didn't just take land. He created a problem for himself. Because the easiest access point to his construction site, the one all his trucks were using, ran right along that boundary. And according to my survey, part of it crossed onto my property. Not a lot. Just enough. Just enough to matter. So I spent that afternoon walking it, measuring it out myself, pacing the edges, lining it up with the markers Hank had placed. And the more I looked at it, the clearer it became. He needed that entrance. Without it, those trucks would have a hard time getting in clean, maybe not at all without rerouting everything. And rerouting meant time. And time meant money. That's when the idea settled in, not all at once, but slowly, like something clicking into place. I wasn't going to argue with him. I wasn't going to threaten him. I was just going to use what was already mine. So that weekend, I made a trip into town, picked up a couple of heavy-duty wooden posts, the kind meant to last, along with a thick steel chain and some hardware. Nothing fancy, nothing illegal. Just solid, simple materials. Saturday morning, I got to work. The air was quiet, that early kind of quiet where the world hasn't fully woken up yet. I measured twice, lined everything up carefully with the actual property line, and then I dug in. Post holes first, deep enough to hold firm. Set the posts, packed the dirt tight, made sure they stood straight. Took my time with it. No rush. Then I ran the chain between them, pulling it taut across the edge of that entrance. Not the whole thing, just the portion that crossed onto my land. If you stood back and looked at it, it almost seemed insignificant. Just a chain. But I knew exactly what it meant. When I finished, I stepped back, wiped my hands, and looked at it for a long moment. No sign, no warning, just a boundary. Monday morning came quick. I was already outside, coffee in hand, leaning against my truck when I heard the first engine in the distance. One of the construction trucks, big and loud, coming down the road like it had every other day. It slowed as it approached the entrance, then stopped. The driver sat there for a second, probably trying to figure out what he was looking at. Then he climbed out, walked up to the chain, gave it a tug, looked around like maybe someone would explain it to him. I didn't move, just watched from where I stood. After a minute, he shook his head, climbed back into the truck, and backed up. Then he drove off. I took a sip of my coffee, trying not to smile. A few minutes later, another truck showed up. Same thing. Slow down. Stop. Confusion. Leave. By the third one, I could see a couple workers gathering near the entrance, pointing, talking, trying to figure out what to do. That's when Travis showed up. He came in fast, tires crunching hard against the gravel, door opening before the truck even fully stopped. He stepped out, already looking irritated, eyes locked on the chain like it had personally offended him. He spotted me pretty quickly, walked over with that same controlled energy he had before, but this time, there was something underneath it. "What is this?" he asked, gesturing toward the chain. I took another slow sip of coffee, set the cup down on the hood of my truck. "That," I said, "is my property line." He let out a short breath, like he was trying to stay patient. "You're blocking my entrance." I shook my head slightly. "No, I'm not. I'm blocking the part that crosses onto my land." His jaw tightened just a bit. "Not much, but enough. We need that access," he said. "Those trucks can't get in like this." I shrugged. "Sounds like a problem." That landed. You could see it in his eyes. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Look, if this is about the fence, it is about the fence," I cut in, still calm. I walked over to my truck, grabbed the copy of the survey Hank had marked up, and handed it to him. "You moved it 8 feet onto my property." He glanced down at the paper, barely looking, then handed it back. "Our survey says otherwise." I nodded slowly. "Then you might want to double-check your survey." There was a pause, the kind where neither person wants to be the first to give ground. Behind him, another truck had pulled up, idling, waiting. One of the drivers leaned out the window, clearly frustrated. Travis glanced back, then returned his attention to me. "This is going to slow everything down," he said. I met his gaze. "Yeah," I said. "It probably will." For a second, I thought he might push harder, maybe raise his voice, try to intimidate me into backing down. But he didn't. He just stood there, weighing it, calculating. Then he gave a tight nod, like he was shelving the argument for later. "We'll figure something out," he said. I picked up my coffee again. "I'm sure you will." And just like that, he turned and walked back toward the site, already pulling out his phone, probably calling someone, trying to fix a problem that didn't exist a few days ago. The rest of that day was messy. Trucks came, trucks left. Some tried to angle around the chain, squeezing past in ways that looked questionable at best. A couple of them gave up entirely. Work slowed. You could feel it in the air, that shift from smooth operation to controlled frustration. And I just went about my day. Mowed part of the field. Fixed a loose hinge on my shed. Nothing dramatic. But every time I glanced over and saw that chain doing exactly what it was supposed to do, I felt something settle. Not victory. Not yet. Just balance. Day 2 wasn't any better for them. If anything, it got worse. By mid-morning, there were more workers standing around than actually working. I saw Travis pacing at one point, phone pressed to his ear, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to keep everything from unraveling. And here's the thing. I didn't enjoy watching him struggle. Not really. But I also didn't feel bad. Because he had a choice. He could have fixed it the easy way. Instead, he chose the hard one. And now, we were both living with it. By the third day, I had a feeling something was about to give. You can only hold that kind of tension for so long before it snaps or bends. And sure enough, late that afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was before I even opened the door. There's a certain kind of knock when someone shows up because they have to, not because they want to. Slow, measured, not too loud. Like they're trying to keep control of the situation before the conversation even starts. I set my coffee down, walked over, and pulled the door open. Travis stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders a little tighter than before, like the last couple days had taken something out of him. He gave a quick nod, no smile this time. "Got a minute?" he asked. I leaned against the doorframe, didn't invite him in. "Depends what for." He exhaled through his nose, glanced past me for a second, then back. "We need to sort this out." I let that hang there for a moment. Not to be difficult, just to make sure he understood something had changed. "Yeah," I said finally, "we do." There was a pause, and then he stepped a little closer, lowering his voice like this was something private, even though half his crew was probably within earshot across the field. "Look," he said. "I had my guys recheck the measurements." I raised an eyebrow slightly, waiting. He shifted his weight, jaw working just a bit. There might have been an error. He didn't say it easily. You could tell that word didn't come natural to him. I nodded once slow. Funny how that happens. He ignored that, or at least pretended to. "We can move the fence back," he continued. "Put it where it was before." I crossed my arms. "Where it actually belongs." He gave a short nod. "Yeah." Another pause. The air between us wasn't tense in the same way anymore, but it wasn't friendly either. It was transactional. "Clear." "And the chain?" he asked. I glanced past him toward the entrance, where everything had slowed to a crawl again. "The chain comes down when the fence goes back." He studied my face for a second, like he was checking for any hint that I might change my mind or push for more. But I didn't. I wasn't interested in dragging this out. I just wanted what was mine. "All right," he said. "We'll take care of it today." I gave a small nod. "Good." And just like that, it was done. No handshake. No apology. Just an understanding, finally built on something real instead of assumption. He turned and walked back toward the site, already calling out to his crew, his voice sharper now, more urgent. Within an hour, the machines shifted direction. I watched from my porch as workers pulled up the new fence posts, one by one, undoing what they'd done earlier that week. There was something almost poetic about it, seeing that clean, straight line disappear, replaced again by the boundary that had been there long before either of us showed up. They worked fast, faster than I expected. Turns out, when time starts costing you money, motivation shows up real quick. By late afternoon, the fence was back where it belonged. Not the old weathered one, but a new one, placed exactly along the original line. 8 feet of my field, quietly returned. I walked out there as the last post went in, boots sinking slightly into the dirt, and just stood there for a second, looking down the line. It felt right again. Not perfect, not untouched, but right. One of the workers gave me a quick nod as he packed up his tools. I nodded back. No words needed. That evening, as the sun started dropping behind the trees, I went back over to the entrance. The chain was still there, stretched tight between the posts, catching the last bit of orange light. I reached out, unhooked it, and let it fall slack. No big moment, no audience, just a simple action to match everything that came before it. The next morning, the trucks rolled in like they used to. No hesitation this time, no confusion, just work. And just like that, things moved on. But here's the part that stuck with me. It wasn't the fence, or the chain, or even the standoff. It was how close I came to doing nothing, to letting it slide because it seemed easier, because part of me thought, it's just 8 feet, does it really matter? And maybe to some people, it wouldn't. But to me it did. Not because of the land itself, but because of what it represented. Boundaries. Respect. The idea that you don't get to take something just because you think you can get away with it. A few days later, I ran into Travis again, out by the road. He slowed his truck as he passed, rolled down the window. "Fence looks good," he said. I leaned on my own truck, arms resting on the door. "Yeah," I replied, "it does." There was a brief pause, like maybe he was considering saying something more. Then he gave a small nod. "Take care. You too." And that was it. No hard feelings, but no friendship either. Just two people who understood each other a little better than before. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because some folks I've told this story to think I went too far. They say I should have just handled it through lawyers, kept things clean, avoided the whole standoff. Others think I didn't go far enough, that I should have pushed for compensation, made a bigger issue out of it, taught him a real lesson. Me? I don't know. I did what made sense in the moment. I used what I had, stayed within my rights, and let the situation resolve itself. But I'll tell you this, if I had backed down, if I'd let that fence stay where it was, I don't think it would have stopped at 8 feet. Because people like that, they don't test boundaries once. They test them until they find where they break. So maybe the real question isn't whether I was right or wrong. Maybe it's this. When someone crosses a line that clearly belongs to you, how far are you willing to go to take it back? Would you have handled it differently? Would you have let it slide? Or done something even bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this. And if you've ever dealt with a situation like this, neighbors, property lines, someone pushing a little too far, I'd like to hear that too. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because I've got a few more stories that might make you think twice about where your own boundaries are.